Nerds, welcome to Into the Wild, your favourite nature podcast. The nature podcast that's the giant wooden tree stump of knowledge to the hungry and busy beaver that's you lot, our nerds.
Oh, I'm glad
Did that one work?
I think it works. I have some questions around, the preference of a tree stump to a beaver as opposed to a full tree.
I'd say they need the tree stump.
But I also just feel like I feel like we're setting the bar low for us, which is great because our science sometimes is questionable. So we're not a full juicy tree. We're just the stump. And I'm happy with that.
I'm fine with that. I'm fine being a stump.
Great. So how are you?
I'm grand. I'm tanned in the face. I've got a Hawaiian shirt on. It's very warm in London, and I've got a beer. Need I need any more?
Tanned?
If that's a phrase.
I didn't know that was a new word for red. I'm tanned in the face.
I am quite red.
You are?
That is quite red, isn't it?
Well, for me, because I'm seeing you on a screen, it could just be the screen.
It's the screen.
Yeah, that's a shame.
You look cold. Your picture, like the nerds can't see this, but mine is very bright. I'm red in a Hawaiian shirt. Yours looks so blue.
I know my lips.
You look like a Titanic victim on the water.
Come back.
Just blow a whistle. Help.
Oh,
I mean, we shouldn't mock the victims of the Titanic.
We're just Celsiusly challenged at the moment here up north, and it's okay because we might be going somewhere a little bit warmer, Ryan, at some point. Well, we can talk about that at a later date.
At a later date, don't worry, Shake. Your UV is coming.
Okay, great. Any good wildlife happening in London?
Yes. What's been happening? I had another flying ant day the other day, another ant sex fest.
Yeah.
That happened. I don't know why I said it like that.
Tell me what you witnessed. Tell me the telltale signs. For those that don't know there's going to be people who don't know what a flying ant day is. What is it?
Oh, flying ant day. Well, for a start, it does happen on a day, but this is a whole season. It's not just one day a year. It starts from usually about late July, goes on all the way, actually late June, throughout July, August, and all the way through mid to late September, depending on the weather. It always is usually on a very hot day following rain, so humidity is a key factor in this. And it's basically when all the males and females, or the potential queens and the males, emerge. This is the only time there's male ants that come out, I will say. They come out and they have sex in the sky. The males then fall to the floor and pretty much get eaten or die in 24 hours. The females, the queens, will land to the floor. They gnaw their own wings off and they look for a new place to start their own colony. So all Flying Ant Day is, I say all, but it is just a big ant orgy in the sky.
That sounds exciting. Maybe people will notice a little bit more when there are flying ant days, which is great.
Well, interestingly, the one that happened yesterday on my street, the ants were a lot smaller.
Yeah, right. Okay.
They're happy. So I don't know what's going on there. But
I wonder whether
it's
just. I think it's like Christmas songs where it comes round once a year and you're like, oh, God, not heard this in years, and it's usually just about a year. And I think you just don't see flying ants all the time. That when you see them, you think they're small.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to my TED Talk on plants.
I cannot wait to hear the Royal Entomological Society's thoughts on our statement that flying ants are just like Christmas songs.
Come here for the interesting, diverse perspectives on nature. Yeah. So my nature, I've had two.
Yeah, what's yours?
I've had two cool nature things. In the last month, we have had a dead basking shark wash up on the shores of the Isle of Bute.
What?
Yeah. It was so rotten.
I bet you went with your hacksaw with that.
We got a hacksaw on it. It was so rotten, I couldn't tell the front end from the back end.
Oh.
And something which can only be described as a hollandaise sauce lookalike fluid came out of the basking shark as Lucy Lapwing and myself just removed a bit of it, for like, stop looking so vomity.
I'm sorry, but you've just ruined Eggs Benedict for me.
I'm so sorry. You're not.
She's the most middle-class thing I've ever said.
Are you an Eggs Benedict fan?
Well, I was until I found out the basking sharks are where hollandaise sauce splurts out from.
I didn't know which bit of the flesh it came out of. It just emerged at some point.
That helps.
We used a hammer, a chisel, and a hacksaw.
Nice.
So that was cool. Oof. Yeah, and then the other cool thing that I spent Sunday walking around the woods at the north of the island, and it was full of lichen, full of moss, and
nice.
Actually, interestingly, brand new slime mold for me, And the green elf cups were in
nice.
fruiting bodies were out, which was cool. So all
That's
in
really
all,
nice.
we are wet and cold up here, but we have smelly dead things and fungi and slime molds.
Oh, book my train now.
Come on up.
Well, that's nice. That's really nice. Well, I'm glad you're well. And it's lovely to see you. Should we jump into our first segment of the show?
Let's jump in or step in slowly.
Let's step in slowly. There's no rush. There's no
we're
rush.
getting old.
Oscar's there editing going, we are on a time. We literally are on the clock.
What are we talking about today?
No, we're not there yet. It's a segment, mate. Come on,
come on.
this.
I don't. I do as I'm told.
It's time for Nature News. Yes, here we go. Do you mind if I start? Can I share mine first?
Oh, always, Ryan.
Always. I'm going to go first. So this actually you'll like this one because it's about Scotland.
So easily pleased.
So I got this from the BBC's website back from July, but still as relevant in August. Numbers of one of Scotland's rarest plants have more than trebled on a hill in central Scotland following restoration work, and that flower is called sticky catchfly. It's a nationally rare species with fewer than 18 populations scattered across Britain, and around 10,000 flowering stems of the plant were counted by volunteers. God bless volunteers in conservation. Jesus. During a 3-day survey on, and I'm not going to pronounce this right, anyone from Scotland that's got a problem with that, talk to Nadia. It's a 3-day survey on Damyat in the Ochil Hills. I feel like I've got Ochil right.
Yeah, sounds right. I don't show up my Scottish credentials, Ryan, live on air.
Well, if you're live on air, an increase from 3,000 in 2013 to 7,000 extra flowering stems. The FFC, which is the Future Forest company, took over the management of the Damyat site in 2021 and has since embarked on native woodland and restoration program. This includes removing sheep and reducing numbers of roe deer around the crags. The sticky catchfly plant has long recorded history in Scotland and is said to have been admired by James VI on the crags of Arthur's Seat. It can be identified by its pink flowers and sticky stem that prevents herbivorous insects such as aphids from climbing up it. Geez, we need to get that bit of DNA and put that on our food plant.
Just sticky stem from climbing up it with so many. You got that out well.
Did I?
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
That's
happy.
happy.
Half a pint in, that weren't too bad.
That's a happy story. Have you ever been to Arthur's Seat?
Yeah, several times.
Yeah,
I like it up
great,
there.
isn't it? Yeah.
I used to do it after I did the Edinburgh Fringe. It used to be my last day before I went home. Once the Fringe was all done, I used to go up to Arthur's Seat.
Yeah.
Never really had the time during the Fringe, but I used to go up at the end.
Cracking. Nice news, thank you.
Yeah.
Mine's.
Right, what's yours?
Whoa, you are like in the lovely little minutiae of the world there right now, and I'm going to zoom right out. Have you ever heard, Ryan, of the term, about the overshoot day?
Overshoot day?
Yeah.
No.
This is it's going to sound sad, but there is positive tint to what I'm about to say. This is the day each year when we have consumed enough of Earth's resources to sustain the population, and then everything that we consume afterwards is too much. So
every day.
Well, not so much. So Earth Overshoot Day is 1st of August was our overshoot day.
Wow.
So we've used enough. We can't use any more resources.
That's later than I thought.
Well, it's been growing in terms of resources. It started to halt. It's not necessarily reversing, but it's stopping in terms of how resources that we're consuming.
Okay, that's interesting.
It's an interesting trend. I think, I don't know who's got sat with a calculator on this.
Yeah.
But
Someone's
an awful
just
lot of
counting.
data just adding up. How many
I'm done.
How many inkjet printers did you get through? Kind of, you know.
How many papayas did we eat?
Yeah, exactly. Where's the papaya man to tell me? I think, honestly, but it's starting to halt, which is, I don't know, just, I'm always skeptical about these things, but also slightly interested in these kind of things.
Well, the data's coming from somewhere.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So it's like, be skeptical of it, but also it's better than having the data saying that it's growing and getting worse.
Well, yeah, so after increasing almost every year for decades, the global overshoot day appears to have stabilised, indicating the world may have reached a turning point, says Christoph Bowles, Policy Director at environmental NGO Greenwatch. There are many indicators that the overconsumption will soon decrease, he said in a statement. However, warned that climate environmental protection measures would still need to be greatly accelerated in order to avoid irreversible climate tipping points. But at least we've stopped and we've slowed. Do you want to know who is the first country to meet their overshoot day, and when do you think that is?
Oh, jeez. Okay, so
that's globally everyone together, but each country has its own.
Okay, right. I'm going to go with either the US or China, which is the first country. And I think they hit it, either one of them. I think China, if it's China, I think they would hit it about April. I think they're early, maybe even sooner. If it's US, I reckon June or July.
Okay, so you were right to think that the US and China are early on, but the actual earliest is in the 11th of February. Which is horrifically terrifying.
Jesus Christ.
Which is Qatar.
Oh, shit, really?
Yeah. I think that's a lot of fucking air conditioning, if I'm honest with you.
Yeah. Do you know what? We can't blame them.
Was that the World Cup?
Yeah, was that what it was?
I don't know. But USA, March the 14th. Germany and Ireland, both the 2nd of May. China's the 1st of June.
When's the UK?
It's actually not on there, but countries doing a bit better. Ecuador and Indonesia are around about November, so they're pretty much nearly using what is available for the people.
What they need. That's
but that's just
what interesting story and research.
Thank you.
Didn't know that was a thing. Right, nerds. Well, it's time for the segment that we're all waiting for from our partners for 2024 from the RES. It's of course time for
Royal Entomological Society segment of the month.
Yes, it's the RES segment, and it starts with on the 6th of September, there is an RES Southwest online meetup. This informal online meetup is an opportunity to meet Liz Evesham, the RES's regional representative for Southwest of England, to discuss opportunities for activities in the local area. So if you live in the Southwest, the RES invite you to come along and meet fellow entomologists and naturalists in your region and consider possible activities for the year. That could include talks, walks, visits to various places of interest, and they encourage you to come along with any ideas you might have and consider things like costs involved, venues, accessibility, general interests of the fellow members as well. This is a free event, and simply all you've got to do is register your details via the events page on the RES. Next up is Ento24, a massive, massive weekend for entomology. It's from the 10th to the 12th of September, where you can join the entomological community with a chance to present your work, network, and build connections. Tickets are priced up, so becoming a member of the RES is worth doing so to save a few quid on that as well. And finally, the Royal Entomological Society's annual insect photography competition is now open for submissions. The deadline is the 31st of October to get up to 3 insect photos submitted for a chance to win up to 750 quid plus a brand new camera. Under and over 18 categories are available, and you just need to head to the insectweek.org website to learn more. And that is the end of the RES segment of the month, and everything I've listed there is linked in the write-up of this episode. Right, Nadia.
Yeah?
Shall we brace hand in hand?
Should we dive in?
And dive in?
Yeah.
Let's go. Right, what are we talking about this week, Nadders?
Nadders, that's the new one for me. That's what happens after one beer's happened. You get a nickname.
And get a nickname. I'm excited for this episode, mainly because we get to revisit the chat with Chandika. I'm going to drop his name early.
Very, very lovely human being that we met at Bird Fair.
Yeah.
I'm quite looking forward to re-listening to that after probably being a little bit half-cut doing it, to be quite honest with you.
We were half-cut.
Yeah, it's an interesting... Today we are talking about wildlife tourism.
With a question mark.
Question mark.
Wildlife tourism?
Is it? Is it?
Is it?
Well,
Is it?
Well, I guess wildlife tourism is wildlife tourism. But ecotourism, there's another word that I'm going to throw at you.
Yes.
Is it all positive? Is it all good news? Let's just dive into doing it. First question I've got for you, Ryan, though, quickly.
Ooh.
Have you done it? Have you partaken?
Yes. Across, I'd say, a bit of a spectrum of ways across the years.
Yeah.
When I was a lot younger, I remember, if we're counting things like this as wildlife tourism, I remember sitting on the back of an elephant when I was 18.
Wow, you
doing
did that
in Thailand. Yeah, 100%. Nothing I would do now. Certainly not. But back then, I was just different mindset. So definitely did that in Thailand. What else have I done? I've gone whale watching. I've gone to see macaques in Morocco. And also when I was in Kuala Lumpur, I went to a temple where there was primate. I think they were just part
But
of
were
also
they
the
just there?
cultural-
You didn't go
I
to
think
see
they were
them?
just there. I
Yeah.
don't think that was actually wildlife tourism.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've done bits. I always find it very tricky though, because as I've got older, you do get more skeptical of things.
The older you get, sadly, the more you go through and the more you've received more input and information and knowledge the older you get. And so
Yeah.
you can reflect. When you're younger, your world is small and things seem a little less urgent.
Hence the title wildlife tourism with a question mark.
Well, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because we talk about, I do think that our parents were of the age group where tourism was very much guilt-free because they didn't really know about the impacts. You know, if you were traveling in the 70s and 80s and maybe even 90s, there was a lot of the world that you could go to that was quite untouched and still felt remote, and there were a lot of ecosystems still intact. And then we learned from our parents what are normal things to do, which is like go on your holidays. And your holidays do consist of going abroad if you come from a family where financially that was, you know, something that you did. I mean, getting to like the early 2000s, late 1990s, flights were getting cheaper and cheaper anyway. But just there was a guilt-free time that, you know, like you said, you were 18, you went on holiday, you rode an elephant. You didn't know any better. Obviously, you wouldn't do it now. I think that's okay.
No,
Trust me, Ryan, there were
wouldn't
things
do it
that I
now.
did when I was 18 that I wouldn't do now.
No, I would not do now. No, 100%. It's that kind of thing. I was traveling at the time. You go to Thailand, there was an elephant sanctuary, you ride around the forest. It was just kind of like, because you're 18, or I was 19, sorry, you're traveling around. It's just, you're in that buzz. You're not, you know, like you said, there was loads of decisions I made traveling at 19 that, to be honest, would not do again. And loads that I did that I would do again. Bungee jumping. But yeah, so it's that kind of, you just get soaked up in this whole everyone's doing it and kind of thing. But then as you grow up, and it's part of growing up, right? You do shit like that.
I mean, I feel like I did it quite fairly recently. I mean, so my wildlife tourism is only, I've been on bird watching holidays, and I really still even now feel about some of those experiences where like it's the flight that's the problem. It's never been the thing that I've done when I've got there, because as a bird watcher, I'm just walking around bird watching like I would here. In the UK, like I'm just walking around habitats, often not in nature reserves and often not in conservation sites, just literally when you go to another country, any bird's a new bird. So I think the closest thing I've done is I did do whale watching.
Yeah.
And I guess I did go to Sri Lanka, which we're going to talk about today.
Absolutely. And I what was interesting when I knew we were talking about this topic, I was like, you know, it's hard to, and one of our guests that we've got coming on the show, we do briefly talk about this, is when does wildlife tourism become specifically wildlife tourism? Is it something like you said, going on a bird watching holiday, or going to specifically only be immersed in a certain area with wildlife? Or does it count if you're on holiday and you do a bit of ecotourism whilst you're there doing other things? Do we count that in as wildlife tourism? So I don't know how that is calculated up, but in my head, I was like, I wonder how much globally is put into the global economy from wildlife tourism. So a bit of research I found out, and this is from the World Travel and Tourism Council, although it's difficult to calculate, and you know, obviously the impact of wildlife tourism due to it's just unreliable data, but the WTTC puts it as an annual contribution to the global economy at around about $340 billion a year going into wildlife tourism. So it's a huge percentage of global GDP. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Going into it. So, but obviously those numbers can be taken with a pinch of salt, but it's obviously something that attracts us. Do you know what I mean? It's that kind of adventure, that kind of, I want to see something. Enchantment. I don't get to see it every day. And especially exotic wildlife, you know, yes, we want to like romanticize the wildlife on our own land where we are in our own countries, but at the same time there is something exciting. I think that's something innate in us that you're never going to get rid of, to go and see something and have an adventure elsewhere.
I think that is a condition of what it is to be human, is to wonder what is beyond the horizon, off the shore, across the ocean, across the next mountain range. I think the reason why humans have traversed the planet is because there's a sense of curiosity within us and what could be around the corner. And you know, when you apply the means and capitalism to do that, then it makes total sense that it is within us to do that. I think let's be honest about the context that we're talking, because you can talk about morally right and wrong all you want to the end of the day, and you can look at the socioeconomic benefits and all these things, but like, of course humans are going to consume that as a product. You know, if we're going to consume Ferraris, big houses, fast women, I don't know.
Fast women.
What's like the saying? Fast cars, fast women. Is that a thing?
Someone's been watching the Olympics too much.
Is that? Yeah. Some of them.
No one.
Is it fast men?
No, it's not fast. It's fast cars. Why would it be fast women?
I don't know. I just feel like this.
Oh my God, that was hilarious.
I'm dying. Okay, but
the big question.
But all the thing is, of course, you're going to consume. If someone says, "Hey, for this amount of money, you can go to a tropical place and look at all of these incredible animals," of course, it's going to be something that we're going to consume.
Well, this is it, and I think the big question that we've got here with wildlife tourism, and again, one of our guests says this as well, is like, you know, wildlife tourism is full of people trying to save money on their holidays and their trips. They're not trying to pay a lot of money for it. They're trying to get bargains on flights, on hotels and stuff like that. The big question here is the money, the 340 odd billion pounds globally raised, is that benefiting global conservation communities and stuff? If that answer is no, then the rest of it is kind of moot, right? It's just a capitalist, consumerist kind of
for
thing
sure.
That is there. If it is not supporting habitat species, very doubtful systemic change, or communities, then that's where our big question mark comes in. But what have you got for me? You told me at the beginning, before we press record, you got a quiz, and I'm dying for this.
Well, I just figured, Ryan, you seem like a man that's good with his money, drinking your Aldi beer. And if you were going to, well, it's not really quite. If you were going to travel the world and try and get bang for your buck, you'd want to go to. You'd want to go to the countries that have got the most biodiversity left, right?
Yes, biodiverse, rich land or seas.
So the Earth's most biodiverse countries. So what do you think came in? Let's go the top three.
As in top. You want the top three most
biodiverse countries? Yeah, if you're booking a holiday, Ryan, you might as well go to some of these places.
Okay, all right. Let's be real. I think at number one, I'm going to go for the top spot first. I reckon Madagascar.
Interesting.
I reckon Madagascar is up there with the richest. I also think I want to go with somewhere like India, but I don't know if they just have the most species. I don't know if it is the most biodiverse, the rich. I don't know. No, maybe not India. Maybe Sri Lanka. Did learn a lot about Sri Lanka. Do you know what? That's what I'm going to go. I'm going to go Madagascar first, then Sri Lanka, then India.
Hard wrong. So I do need to say that the list focuses on total biodiversity, so it's therefore biased towards big countries.
Oh, well, you never said.
I never said that, did I? Well,
no,
I'm
if you had said that, Canada.
So Brazil is top. It's got 17.8% of the world's birds, 13.5% of amphibians, 7.3% mammals, 14.4% reptiles, 12.1% fish, 12.7% tree, plant, species biodiversity.
And also 7% of the world's sarcasm.
Has it really?
No, what are you on about? Just wanted to add a statistic.
I was thinking about Brazil this morning, weirdly, as I was reading about it, completely separate to this, thinking I'd like to go there. Might book a wildlife holiday. Coming behind Brazil, you've got Indonesia, then you've got China, Colombia, Peru, Mexico, Australia. India is number 8 for you there. Then Ecuador, United States, amazingly. But such is the vastness of the United States and the breadth of habitat, there are still incredible areas. I can really vouch for that. But obviously that just means that some countries like Costa Rica are coming in at 27, even though their biodiversity intactness is way bigger. But yeah, okay. So, but I think if any of the countries you mentioned would have sounded great, but I actually would love to go to Brazil.
I would love to. Oh, can you hear that? Can you hear that noise? Can you hear that?
God,
chirping?
have we got bugs again?
Don't say it like that. Love you, RES. Oh God, can you hear that? We've got bugs again. So Nadia, it's time to bring in my bug person that we're talking to, and it is none other than the science advisor for the podcast anyway. It's Professor Adam Hart. I managed to grab a chat. I love Adam. Managed to grab a chat with Adam about how insects are kind of, is there insect tourism? Are they benefiting from wildlife tourism? So this is the chat we had. So, ladies and gentlemen, here is Professor Adam. Go on.
Just say, if there is insect tourism, they're not going to be the 5-star hotel people.
They don't sound like it, do they? I wish they were. I wish that's where the casinos were as well. Famously, insects don't like bright light. So, Right, here we go. Here's Adam Hart to give us some information about insects and wildlife tourism. Hello, Adam. Thank you very much for joining on this episode that we are looking at wildlife tourism from a global perspective with a massive question mark at the end, trying to figure out if wildlife tourism is delivering on certain aspects and should we be relying on it, and conservation should be relying on it as kind of all eggs in one basket in some cases. So you're here to talk to me a bit about entomology, insects around the world. When we look at wildlife tourism, in any country, is it benefiting insects on any level, or are we seeing it more as a con to a lot of these animals?
Well, it's a really interesting question. So first of all, we actually do have entomotourism around the world. So there are some people who will pay to go on holiday, see insects. So you have butterfly safaris, for example. And there are companies that are set up to specifically offer those types of experiences. And then there are things like fireflies, for example. There are certain valleys and places where they come out in huge numbers, an amazing thing to go and witness. So that becomes a sort of add-on to other tourism and so on. Are they benefiting from it? I guess in some cases they probably are. If people are looking after the local habitat and things, I imagine in some cases, in many cases, they probably aren't specifically. And the other problem, of course, is when you set up tourism concerns. I mean, one of the things that people really don't want when they're on holiday are insects, right? So I was staying in a place in South Africa recently. I think it was on the outskirts of Pilanesberg National Park. And it's a great place for insects and stuff in the bush around there. But there was almost nothing. I'll confess, I was staying in quite a fancy place. I thought I'd treat myself for a couple of days. It's been a tough year. Why not? And I was looking around. There were a few birds and stuff, but bird life's often quite good around those places. But it was very hard to see insects. But you can see why, because of course, standing water's been pretty much eliminated. No one wants to have mosquitoes around. People are being very, very careful about clearing up paths and getting rid of wood piles and all the kind of stuff that tends to attract it. Because the reality is, when people are swimming by the pool, they don't want to get out and find a scorpion's crawled in their towel and so on. So on a sort of smaller scale, you've probably got the idea that tourism really isn't benefiting insects. But, you've alluded to it there, and it's probably going to be a common theme in your discussions, is the idea that tourism can help to promote habitat conservation. And if that's happening, for sure, it can promote insects. But it would be a very, very rare insect indeed where they would have enough pull on their own as a species to be able to promote habitat conservation. The reality is you're looking at large animal tourism, predator tourism, iconic, whatever that may mean, right? Iconic species tourism. We all know what we mean by that. Elephants, essentially, lions, tigers. Yeah. Right. In Australia, you've got things like saltwater crocodiles and stuff. These types of tourism, they can work. But the reality, as we've talked about with hunting before and stuff, in principle, yes, it can work. And in practice, it works in some places, but it doesn't work everywhere. And I think that is the case with tourism. I mean, to give you an example, the place I stayed at, I believe, is supposed to pay an amount each year as a sort of gratuity, essentially, to the national park that's looking after Pilanesberg, to for the privilege of being on the outskirts of it. And certainly the last time I was down there, that there was some robust discussions between different people as to when that money was going to be paid. And meanwhile, of course, I'm sat there listening to people's conversations, which are typically along the lines of how little people have paid to get there. There's this competitive thing amongst tourists about, I got my room last minute on booking.com. They paid me to be here. Yeah, it's that type of that type of sort of thing. So it's, tourism's tricky because in reality, people don't want to pay. They're there on holiday. Yeah, exactly. And it depends, right? They're there on holiday and they go and see some stuff. That's different from solely being away to go and see stuff. It's a different type of tourism model as well, which is tricky.
I guess that's interesting, isn't it? Because when we're looking at wildlife tourism, there will be like a kind of a spectrum of what people mean by that. Like you said, there might be some butterfly safaris where you're going into kind of deep habitat, where you're going purposely. You might be staying in the bush kind of thing to see butterflies, if those kind of things exist, where we look at safaris, which are a bit more, I would say, kind of commercialized, I guess.
It's more of a touristic experience.
More of a touristic experience. And you're going to the country, you're going into the environment. If you see 1 or 2 bits of megafauna a day, that's perfect. But you're not you want to go back to your 5-star lodge at the end of the day. You want to sit by the pool. You want to have a gin and tonic. So it's kind of, are we counting that as wildlife tourism, or are we counting that? It's how we define it.
This is a really interesting thing, isn't it? Peelers Bay National Park's a good example, actually, because it's right by Sun City, which is, obviously a huge resort, amazing water park and golf courses and all of that. So a lot of people will go along there and stay a few days. And one of the things they'll want to do is to go and look at some wildlife. So yeah, they probably won't want in reality to get up and do the early morning one. It's the best time to see game and, animals is like, as the sun's coming up and that's like 6 o'clock. And let's be honest, during an environment with casinos and water parks and bars, the afternoon's going to be more appealing, right? So you've got people coming out from their touristic day, and then they're going to get into a game viewing vehicle about 3 o'clock. They're going to get driven around until, just after sunset, probably. Halfway around, there'll be a little stop off, and there'll be, as you say, some gin and tonics or some drinks. And the guide will be telling them lots of cool stuff about what they're seeing, and they'll be snapping away with their cameras and phones and so on. They'll get back to the place, and then they'll go and have dinner at the resort. Yeah. At what point do we consider that to be ecotourism? And yet, I think that is, if you ask people, let's say that people went exclusively to do that, and they stayed in one of the resorts around the outside, and they were doing the morning and the afternoon. Well, is that ecotourism, or is that just staying in a nice resort and going out and do something? So it's an ill-defined term, really. And the idea that it sort of de facto contributes to the environment that you're seeing is a problem, because it doesn't.
It's tricky to...
Unless you know the relationships between all of those operators and, the higher order structures in the country that are actually paying for it, you can't really say whether it's ecotourism or not. And when you do, the examples that I've found, it's pretty much lacking. The tourist model's not working for many, many places, sadly.
And I guess when we're looking at insects as well, it's even harder to see if that's going to be benefiting. I mean, the big thing here is habitat, but then the other thing that insects are massively reliant on is environment conditions as well. It's not just, you could have the perfect habitat, but if it's suddenly raining all the time, or if it's intensely dry, like you said, some water areas have been removed to remove insects, and it's as easy as that. So when we're starting to look at the impacts of the climate crisis that's having, how, for example, in the UK, let's look, how have insects been doing in the last few years?
Well, certainly this year has been a tricky year, I think, for a lot of species. A lot of people are saying they've seen fewer wasps around. I often don't take much notice of that. Let's wait until the data come in. But the reality is, I have to say, I've seen very few wasps around. It's certainly not been a good year for them around here. And it kind of tracks, we had a very, very cold, wet spring. That's awful for them trying to establish a nest. So it kind of, makes an impact. The problem is, of course, disentangling climate change from normal weather phenomenon. So we've had a lower jet stream this year, which is not uncommon, and it's caused the weather patterns we've had, which have knock-on effects for insects. That's not part of anthropogenic climate change, but it clearly is an issue of the climate that influences insects. Exactly how all of that sort of shifts through the next sort of decade or two. I guess that's why we do long-running studies. That's why we started doing the Big Wasp Survey, for example, is to get those sorts of long-lasting data. But yeah, absolutely. To get back to your original and key point, weather conditions and climate have a huge influence on insects, which of course have knock-on influence on everything else. So yeah, some insects will prosper. And some won't, and that's what we're finding actually when we look across the sort of insect declines. In general, the pattern's not great, but actually there are some groups that are doing all right, and some species that are doing well. But they're the species that are able to thrive in the conditions that we're slowly creating.
I know me and you have said kind of many a times, I think just one-on-one when we're talking about people that fly around the world to go and do wonderful things, whether it is to go and stay in, 5-star lodges and go and see some giraffe for half an hour or something, and want to help kind of wildlife. And many people are sold the view that is going to help. Do you think when we're, again, looking at insects, if people are sat there listening now, or just out there in the pub when our friends or our listeners are going to be listening to this, the advice to pass on is, if you want to help wildlife, do you think it's a case of, instead of flying around the world to do this, give the money direct to things that are helping wildlife?
In principle, yes, but in practice, of course, that's not what people are going to do. And,
No, exactly.
and I think one of the great problems with a lot of the climate change stuff and a lot of the messaging about it, and I think we spoke about this once before on the podcast maybe, is virtually everything you've got to do is not good, right? Well, it's good for the planet, but it's not great for... It's not a great message to be able to go out to people and go, listen, the diet you're eating, that's not good. You go, yeah, but I like that. You go, yeah, but you can't do that anymore. You go, okay, but I can go on holiday there. Yeah, no, you can't go on holiday. Okay, but I can drive to the shops. Well, no, actually. It's like, well, can I at least finish my house extension? It's like, well, what's it made from? It's like basically every part of our lives is in general, for most people, it's a broad brush, but in general, we're not doing great things for the planet. And in order to reverse that, we have to do things which make us do less of the things we like. And that's a tough message. And saying to people, listen, you care about the planet, right? Don't go and spend, £2,000 or whatever on this. Just give it $2,000 to somewhere else. And it's like, yeah, that would help. But in reality, no one's going to do it. I think
no one's going to do it.
I think in terms of insects, it's weak, right? And normally I would run a mile from this. But actually, so this idea of awareness raising, right? It's like, oh yeah, we raised it. We sure raised the awareness out of that. It's like it didn't do any good. But actually, I think with insects, being an advocate for them can really help. It shifts the way that people think. So I've had quite a few contractors around doing bits and pieces on my house, and we often get to talking about, what do you do? And I'll talk about, insects and stuff. And they'll talk about wasps. And, for quite a few of them, I've had this sort of conversation about, when you got a client with wasps, just ask them, are they a problem right now? It's like, yeah, you got wasps in your house and that's cool. But actually, are they a problem? And, a few of them have sort of said that they've been doing that to people. And people have gone, okay, yeah, fair enough. You're right. I don't have to kill them. They're not actually a problem. I've just got wasps in my attic. And I think that sort of slow advocacy can really help. I've noticed, for instance, in this last year, there were some articles, I ended up contributing to quite a few of them about wasps. And was it a bad year for wasps in terms of their numbers and being low and so on? And I haven't seen a negative article really about wasps. Sometimes there'll be a slightly negative headline, right? Because it's clickbait. But actually people are generally, they're going like, wasps are actually really important. And, we should be caring about them. And they're a bit of a nuisance sometimes, but here's some things you can do. That's actually quite a shift in narrative. I think even over the last 5 or 6 years, but definitely over the last sort of 10, 15 years. And that sort of thing, I think, it's not just down to the Big Wasp survey, but certainly me and Siren have done a lot of drum beating for that. But it is quite good now that it used to be, your classic story used to be, wasps a bunch of bastards, we all hate them, blah, blah, blah. Here's how to kill them. And at the end they go, oh, but they're super important for the environment, said, ecologist Adam Hart. and it would literally be that, and at the end that would be the sense of balance. But now it really doesn't seem to be that way. It seems to have expanded out and people are a bit more appreciative. And I think, as much as I hate the notion that raising awareness is somehow doing something, I think in this case, I think it's helping at least for people to become more advocates for what's around them and looking after what they can. It's like when it comes down to it, most of us are able to influence something. Even if it's just a window box or you put some plants outside your front door. Well, actually, if they're insect-friendly plants, you might get a few insects coming on there to gather pollen and nectar. Well, even if it's only a few, that pollen and nectar
being
you've
that
given
change
them,
you want to see, isn't it?
Yeah, and that pollen and nectar you might have given them might be the little bit that they needed to provision another cell, which means there's another insect going into the next generation. And again, the idea of small differences, let's be honest, if we want to change the way the world is, we don't need us recycling better or changing our light bulbs. We need wholesale structural changes to the way we do stuff, right?
Systematic
This
change.
is unfortunately the reality of it.
There's long and short term of it. There's long and short term.
But nonetheless, it's better to do something, right? And actually, I do think we can do those things and they make a difference.
So I think I knew this was going to be the roundup to the end of this chat, but for insects and wildlife tourism, I guess you're saying as most chats with me and you go, well, it depends.
Yeah, it depends. It's such a classic thing, isn't it? It's like, I'm not sitting on the fence, but it depends. I think depends. So. I've actually just been scanning through online here. There's some firefly tourism places, for example, and some of them are clearly like attached to a resort, and it's like, oh, come and we'll do it. But some of them are like, here's a patch of ground, we're looking after it, we're working with local farmers. Yeah, it's part of a conservation project, and as part of that, they're directly funding it through the tourism opportunities that it offers. Well, that's a cool way to do it, because otherwise the reality is they need money, and to make money, you have to use what resources are at your disposal. And if you've got a stunning touristic experience at your disposal and you're trying to preserve that experience, it does make total sense to exploit it in inverted commas, but you've got to do so in a careful way. And you're probably going to make mistakes along the path,
not to do it.
You know.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much for giving us some insight on insects and wildlife tourism.
No problem. Pleasure.
To help me and Nadia try and get through this minefield of a topic.
Yeah, good luck.
Thank you so much again to Adam Hart. Now, it's interesting what Adam said there, is because the big thing is wildlife tourism. And we've said it on the show before, with including hunting tourism, because it's important to remember wildlife tourism is not just as in what we call photo or ecotourism. This can include hunting tourism as well. Mm-hmm. The big thing here is money, but also protection of habitat. So if you are protecting that habitat to keep the species there because people are coming to see it, then yes, insects can kind of benefit from that. But at the same time, the big thing, like you said, Nadia, is the flights. And when the flights are going so much around the world for this kind of activity, and we've got the climate crisis, changing weather patterns and different climates, a big thing for insects is environment kind of conditions as well, rainfall or water there or humidity. If those things start to change and disappear, then so do insects. And I think the most important point Adam made there was a lot of people that go on holidays to do with wildlife enjoy their luxuries at the same time. Now, what they don't see as a luxury is loads of insects flying around. So the first thing resorts will do is find ways to push those insects out to make their guests happy, to ensure that they can see the elephants, the tigers, wherever they are in the world, without having scorpions wandering through the restaurant and stuff like that. So it's a real catch-22. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it depends where you are, what's going on, what kind of holiday you're on. And as I joked with Adam there in the chat, as a scientist always says, it depends. Yeah,
no, it does. And it's really frustrating. I think, like, ultimately, if you were going to push me to lean, I would, like, my heart, my philosophical brain is saying to me, no to wildlife tourism because it's a consumerist product. But the short-term benefits, so such as direct financial contributions to local conservation efforts, are, if you're looking at a species or an area of an ecosystem that's literally been brought back from the brink purely financially from conservation, that's amazing. That's incredible. Had there not have been wildlife conservation and wildlife tourism in that area, that species or that ecosystem might have been lost. But, the long-term effects of only funding conservation this way, I think, just for me, provide like a big question mark. I mean, there's also non-financial contributions to nature conservation, such as the presence of tourists means that there is less poaching. So there's there's also just the existence of nature conservation and nature tourism to an area that becomes like the predominant thing that is celebrated within an area and within a community. The other socioeconomic incentives, conservation can have a positive and it can have a negative. So for example, like conservation can employ, I've got a statistic here of over 20 million people globally.
That's insane.
However, might those people have not been in employment but living a subsistence living? And then actually, is that just saying that people need to live a Western lifestyle where they're increasing? It's really difficult for me to say, but there are obviously pros and cons, mountain gorillas in Rwanda, for example, have stopped poaching because each mountain gorilla family brings in like thousands of pounds each year. Yeah.
It makes sense.
Would I change that for the world? No, because they're mountain gorillas.
Am I going to be the face of that change? No. But I think this is, again, what Adam said here. And all you need to do is be a fly on the wall or an ear next to a conversation. When you're in these kind of, whether you're in a lodge in Namibia or Southern Africa, or maybe even in Brazil and other places, what we've got to remember is that a lot of this land owned is not community indigenous owned anyway. Now, when you start looking at the money coming in, I'm going to quote my granddad, Ron Farquhar, that I quote all the time, is where there's money, there's a fiddle, right? As soon as money's involved, there's a fiddle. Now, again, we've talked about this in hunting tourism and trophy hunting as well. It is widely accepted and known that money doesn't always reach the places it's meant to go. And there are payments that are due to communities, to wildlife, to projects that has taken 2 or 3 years to get there, if at all. So it's all well and good saying that this stuff is happening, but we know that when people that are in charge of that happening, maybe living in Western countries, more developed areas, or more capitalist areas, there's a very good chance that the money's not trickling down. Not saying that happens everywhere. There are some amazing areas where community run, communal areas, that does happen. The same in hunting tourism, the same in photo tourism. It can happen. Doesn't mean that blanket across the board, it does happen. So that's the question mark again we're going to put in there.
And I guess another one is that, when there is an increased amount of tourists, then you're going to need an increased amount of infrastructure. So the amount of habitat that is then lost for big 5-star hotels and lodges.
5-star hotels.
And they want 5-star hotels, and they want to like shower twice a day and use lots of water in a country that might not have a lot of water. So like bringing our Western consumption.
If you're traveling 24 hours to get to rural Botswana, the majority of people, I think it's safe to say, don't want to stay in a tent under the stars. They don't. They want a lodge where they can shower, they can relax, have a meal that evening. Some people might want to sleep under the stars, but not everyone. And it's kind of weighing up. I think this is a wonderful time to bring in Chandika. What do you think?
Let's actually talk to somebody from a country that
who
recently has been engaged with wildlife tourism. Sri Lanka is a country that, because of internal conflicts and civil uprising, has been quite a violent country for many years. So actually closed off to tourism. So compared to countries like in Africa that have had safaris for over 100 years, Sri Lanka is very new to the table.
And Nadia and I were privileged and half cut to talk to Chandika at Global Bird Fair this year. But we were super excited to talk to Chandika, but he was one of these people that you meet and you just kind of get this absolute enthusiasm and passion from straight away. And it's always a pleasure to talk to these people in person. So this chat was recorded live at Global Bird Fair on the Saturday. And we spoke to Chandika, as you will hear, about wildlife tourism in Sri Lanka, how it helps communities, people, and how they dealt with this kind of reliance on this revenue during the COVID pandemic as well. So here is this wonderful chat with Chandika from Jetwings in Sri Lanka. Mike's alive now. I've still got a cocktail.
Great.
What are you having?
A beer, sadly.
Sadly?
Well, it's all hitting. It is. It's been a busy time.
Do you want some Malibu?
No.
No, not again.
Okay.
Right, okay, don't worry about it. Well, we're recording a chat live at Global Bird Fair.
Yeah.
This is a part of our episode on wildlife tourism. And we're joined here by a man called Chandika from Jetwings in Sri Lanka, who's going to talk to us about how this is all working Sri Lankan side.
It's something we talk about on the podcast quite a lot, is this link between conservation and nature and tourism, right? It's one of the biggest, strongest arguments for like getting people around the world is so that we can have this link to conservation. But actually, I can imagine the model is different from country to country and from place to place. So like trying to understand how that actually works in practice and what difference it makes.
Yes.
Which I think our listeners care about because people are conscious, right, about where they travel and if they should travel and whether it's worth it. So
I guess a good starting question for you, Chandika, would be to like kind of give us an overview of like for Jetwings and stuff, how important I would say is wildlife tourism for not only the wildlife and the habitat, but for people living in Sri Lanka as well. How important of a role does that play?
Right. I mean, Sri Lanka is surrounded by nature. Like the oceans, it's got the oceans, the highlands, everything. Everywhere you go, you've got nature. Even the biggest city, Colombo, you got all these people. You've got urban wildlife. I mean, you've got fishing cats and jackals living in Colombo, which is a big thing. And when you go towards even the area surrounding the national parks, all the communities, like Yala National Park is probably the most popular national park in the island, right? Everyone goes there. But all those communities all around that is depending on that park for, their income sources and, little lodges and things like that, and also the big hotels. When it comes to Jetwing and Jetwing Eco Holidays, Jetwing Hotels, I think sustainability and, wildlife tourism, plus the CSR side of it with the social responsibilities, all that is placed very, very high. All the Jetwing hotels, they've got solar, biomass heaters. They look at, even measuring up to the waste stage and, the wastewater, everything. So they're very much, it's the ethos. It's built into Jetwing Eco Holidays. And everyone's slowly putting onto that. And when it comes to wildlife, of course, Sri Lanka is probably one of the best places outside of Africa for wildlife.
Really?
Right. It's got
amazing.
Amazing.
I had the best time in like
I'm
it's
so gutted
good.
I've not been.
It's so good. I saw 10 blue whales.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
10.
That is...
I mean, they're big.
I mean, they're big, yeah.
Yeah.
You'd notice them.
Yeah, it's such an incredible place to go. as a birdwatcher point of view, there's 21 endemic species.
No, there's 34 endemic
34?
species.
Oh my god! How did I only get 20?
Well, clearly didn't
You've
do the
missed out
whole
a few.
place.
I
Missed
feel
out
like
a
I
few.
only missed one, so maybe I've just made that number up. But I feel like I remember when we left, there was one that we didn't get, which is starling.
Oh, the white-faced starling.
Yeah.
All right.
Where are they? Where are they hiding?
They're in Sri Lanka. They're in.
I bet you
get
find them
in
when
the
you
wet
go-
zone,
when
the
you go.
rainforest areas.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but that it's like that. You've got to leave something to come back. We've had a few
I
people
like
come
that,
from
yeah.
come from here. They've missed one endemic, but they've got to come back to Sri Lanka to see that.
yeah. Okay.
And that and wildlife tourism. This is something I personally believe in as well. Plays a huge role in Sri Lanka in conservation.
Okay. How does that work then? How does that work?
Okay, so it works in several ways. One way is, number one, I think it's the local tourists. So all of our wildlife parks have wildlife bungalows inside. And when these are in operation, you've always got people inside. So otherwise our wildlife parks are from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., right? But during the night is when you get all the illegal activities, the poaching and all that stuff that happens. But when the wildlife bungalows are in operation and you've got people inside, it kind of works as a deterrent for people from coming in, because the wildlife officials are inside then. So that works in that way with the local tourists. And then with the foreign tourists, so a good example is Jetwing Villoena. So when they looked at that land, it was just agricultural land, it was bare land. So then they put up a lovely lodge, they created a man-made wetland, and it just started attracting all kinds of species. And the naturalist there, Chaminda, he's in our stand today, he found grey loris, the grey slender loris, in the property.
Wow.
And they figured out that, they were breeding. So they selected an area where they were supposed to put up more rooms, but they decided, no, let's not. We've got an area, we've got loris, they're breeding, let's create a conservation site there.
Wow.
And they created a conservation site. Then we've got other companies, not just Jetwing, there's other tourism-related companies also supporting, maybe not sometimes directly, but even indirectly. So there was a bird research in Manna where they were tagging the migrant birds with satellite collars and seeing how far they were traveling. Some were traveling from the top of the earth all the way down to Sri Lanka. That's my great distances. Again, it was mostly supported by a tourism company.
Yeah.
Then in Yala, some time back, we had issues with leopards kind of feeding on the calves of the cattle herds. Because outside the park, you've got a lot of cattle herders who have cattle mostly for milk. So they have lots of calves, and the calves used to get preyed on, and the farmers used to retaliate by poisoning the carcasses. So it was a big problem. But a hotel chain in the area got together, and they started donating steel pens. So the cattle herders put these calves in the pens at night, and that's reduced the number of calves being preyed on by the leopards
Such
drastically.
a
Simple idea.
Very, very simple.
I always
things.
find with this kind of human wildlife conflict thing, it's always the same kind of, I don't know, like maybe the root of the issue is quite similar country to country, and it's very, even though it's not communicated a lot, it's almost like a very obvious issue. It's like, people are living directly with some animals, there's going to be conflicts, right? And it's always these kind of solutions going, well, we just need to better support the people that are there, whether it's creating better fencing or better, even from a compensation result. Like, do you know what I mean? So it's like we're not fearing that loss too much with it. But I was interested as well, because you said like you're national tourists going around. So how much are Sri Lankan people going to see wildlife within their own country?
A lot. It's
Really?
becoming very popular. I mean,
I went to Yala and I
Yeah,
met a lot of the people.
Really?
Yeah, were
I
from
love
Sri
that.
Lanka.
yeah. So, I mean, you've got a lot of cameras available now, DSLR cameras. You've got a lot of zoom lenses available.
Yeah.
And people have taken up this hobby of photography. Not to say that everyone's ethical, everyone's following the rules. You get the rotten apples. You need to put them, in their place. But it's helping, right? It's helping the communities. It's helping keep the parks open. And you've got people visiting. So, and even people who used to poach have kind of figured out, you know what? I don't need to poach, right? I can get myself a safari vehicle and take people out, right? I personally know a few guys who used to poach.
So used to poach an hour.
And now no, and my friend who's seated there, he's done some training as well for guides who used to be poachers, but now are local guides. They're
I think
helping.
that's such a powerful thing to know
Exactly.
that experience. Yeah.
And he does some night tours around the Sigiri area. The local guide is a former poacher. He's not poaching anymore. He figured out.
For our listeners, what's being poached? What is driving it?
So mostly it's for bushmeat. It's not for the trade, not for fur or tusk. So it's
because I
mainly
think
for
there used to be a
bushmeat.
tusk problem, maybe.
So the main problem with the tuskers in Sri Lanka is they're used in, I don't know, I might get in trouble for saying this,
Yeah.
but they're used in parades,
Okay.
for cultural parades. Right, so throughout history, tuskers have been taken from the wild for these parades.
Yeah.
Plus, when the kings were there for
Yeah,
war
yeah.
and things
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that. So that's what has reduced the gene pool of tuskers. But we do still have wild tuskers.
I did see a
Yeah, you saw
massive
one.
one.
Did you?
Yeah.
It's, I mean, it is lucky. I think it's low as 5%.
Yeah.
Of male elephants that do have tusks, and female elephants don't have tusks.
Wow.
The Asian female elephant doesn't have tusks,
Yeah.
so it's a very low number. But not to say there is no poaching for tuskers, but the more people that go to see these animals and take pictures and promote it, the guys who think what's the point in killing this animal and taking it away, where long term, if this animal survives, we can earn out of it long term.
Yeah.
So people are starting to realize that. Mannar, it's an island, but now it is joined by a causeway to the mainland. You get thousands and thousands of migratory birds coming in, and those days people wanted to block these lands off and build houses and do all kinds of things, but you can't, honestly, because it's seasonal floodplains.
Yeah.
Right? When it rains, it floods. But now they've realized, the birds come there. Let's put up a bird hide, let people come and see the birds. So I think it takes a bit of push from the tourism industry to get these things done. So the bird project in Mannar helped a lot, because they started going and speaking to school children and just telling them, you need to protect these animals, you need to have them, you need to have these areas
Like
protected.
starting right at the young age.
Start at the right age, and now it's picking up, and now
Yeah.
people are getting into it. You've got local guides. When we first started going to Mannar, we had to go and discover ourselves. There's no local people who knew about the birds anyway. But now we've got guys popping up. No one went and pushed them to do it. They realized themselves, and they popped up, and they're taking people around to see the flamingos and the waders. So it's tourism. Personally, it's a very it comes from deep down inside, that I feel like, not because I'm in the tourism industry, but that tourism has to be there to help push conservation, especially for a small island like Sri Lanka.
I guess as well, like it's you've seen kind of that change in people and their kind of perception of what wildlife means to them. So it's gonna have that like kind of big emotional drive for you, like seeing that, I guess, like seeing people change, going
Yeah,
like, I can
yeah.
see wildlife from a different perspective.
I guess I'd never thought about tourism and how it pushes conservation in that way, right? So it's easy to just say it supports conservation, but you've described it really well, how one thing affects the other. And
Do you think that's because of how it works in this country, though? For us, do you think it's hard for us to get our head around that sometimes? Because in our country, that's not how it's not happening like that.
yeah, it doesn't work so
We
much
don't
like-
have that. Because
Right.
that was my question. Sorry to interrupt. I was going to say, we sort of talk about local guides. What is the process? How easy is that for someone local to go, I'm going to start touring locally? Is that just something they have autonomy over to do?
So it's not difficult at all. But if you in Sri Lanka, if you want to be a guide, we've got a couple of types of guides. We've got the chauffeur guide, who does the driving and the guiding as well, and the national guide. So they do most of these group tours that start from Colombo or Negombo or somewhere, go around. But to become a local guide, no, you don't. You just need to gain the knowledge and the experience,
See, that's just not.
right? You
I mean,
don't
it
have
might
to go
happen
through.
around.
Yeah, but we
the UK.
don't get the same kind of wildlife tourism here,
No, we don't. No, that's fair.
which, I
I mean, it's a very different country.
but then we don't have a lot of wildlife left,
Yeah.
right?
No, this
like
is it.
it's not, you look at places like this, they're not thrumming with insects and birds. Like there's
Yeah.
places in Sri Lanka where it's just like dripping with wildlife, and like you can
What a
just,
beautiful phrase.
No, but you can just feel the thrum, and even in
Yeah.
places where there is like lands which are managed for agriculture. In fact,
Yeah.
the first Sri Lankan magpie, is it magpie?
The blue magpie.
Blue magpie.
Yeah.
That I saw. I was in an agricultural, like it was quite a hilly. I can't remember the name of the place now, but it was very hilly.
It's probably Singharaja.
Yeah, that's up with the rainforest.
Yeah. Or was it
Ne-
Kitulgala?
It felt more like just a place where people lived. It was a community, it was a village with
Right.
farms.
Right.
And it felt like it's such small-scale agriculture that wildlife can still
thrive.
Yeah.
Which is what we used to have, right, in England. There used to be small-scale agriculture where actually you're not using big, heavy machinery. And so wildlife kind of, you can't get rid of it. No matter how hard you work the land, like, it is still there. So there is that sense of that. Like, I guess it's just, there's just insects and noise and colour and flowers and and I guess I didn't grow up in Sri Lanka, so I can't spot what might be non-native species, for example.
Right.
So to my untrained eye, it looks really biodiverse and rich. Is that?
It is.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, we do have some invasive species as well that, some flowering plants.
Yeah.
But no, even without that, even if you with the trained eye, you see it, it's still very, very biodiverse. I was talking about Singaraja, the blue magpie. The village is kind of the best place to go and see these birds.
Right.
Really?
Right? The village, because if you go into the forest, you're looking at, thick forest cover.
Of course.
And tall canopies.
They're standing out more in the...
Yeah. But you go into the village, and these villages now have, we've got so many local guides in Singaraja now. And these are, kids who have grown up following researchers and, going and learning on their own. I mean, no one's put them in a classroom or no one's taken them on field trips.
I love that.
Taught them. They've picked it up on their own. They know all the calls, and they've started to do this, guiding. And it's not only the foreigners that make use of them, it's the locals that make use of them as well. So everyone makes use of the local guides in Singaraja, and they've just come up themselves.
I got in the rainforest, there was a guy who was tapping, the sugar fishtail palm.
Yeah.
It is the best stuff I think I've ever eaten in my life. And the guy that we were with, he was just like, do you want some of the real stuff? And I was like, yes. So he took us to this man that just lived in the forest and just tapped it into these big old plastic water bottles.
Yeah.
And I was like, I need this. I was like, it was like crack. It just tastes so good. And so I was like, I need to take this home with me. And then I had this bottle in my suitcase, and I was like, am I allowed to take this back to the UK, through customs? Do I have to declare this?
Such a great question to ask yourself at the airport.
So no, this is about a week before we left.
Oh,
so
really?
I emailed UK customs and be like, look, I'm in Sri Lanka.
I've got the real
I've
stuff.
got this really good stuff. Can I bring it back? And then I think I just did in the end, and they didn't email me back.
All right.
It wasn't their priority, weirdly.
God bless us having control after Brexit, right?
But the going through the nothing to declare, I was just like, just put your head down.
I think if anyone at any point of any day says to me, do you want the real stuff? I'm always going to say yes.
Yeah, I'll have whatever it is.
It's like,
give
sorry,
it.
I wasn't aware I was having the fake stuff. Sorry, absolutely.
My other favourite moment in Sri Lanka was, it's a type of scopsal, right?
Yeah, Serendip scopsal.
You only discovered it well, I say there would have been humans in Sri Lanka that saw that owl, but I'm sure. But it was discovered in 2000
5-ish. It came around 2005 and then properly put out 2005.
An owl, non-recorded. An owl.
An owl?
It's so hard to see.
It's about that big. It's not easy to see. It's about the size, a little bit bigger than your palm.
And it looks like a leaf.
And no one knew of its existence.
No. They've heard it.
Sneaky little
They
owl.
heard it.
They've heard it before.
Do you know what it's like? What does it sound like? Can you do it?
No, unfortunately I can't.
Can you try?
So when did the tourism in Sri Lanka take off?
So unfortunately we've been going through a conflict for about 30 years. It ended in 2009.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had tourists coming into Sri Lanka even before that, during the conflict as well.
Yeah.
But in 2009, it ended. Then tourism picked up 2010, probably 2010 onwards.
So quite recent.
And it was quite recent that, I mean, we've always been a tourist destination.
Yeah.
But because of the conflict, it was mainly concentrated in the north,
yeah,
the
so
north and
you can't
east.
go north, yeah.
And when we were in school, we couldn't go to the north and east. It was
Really?
inaccessible. And even places like Wilpattu, which I love to go to, I couldn't go.
Wow.
Till 2009. I mean, we did go, but it was scary. There was
Yeah.
landmines, and there was people being killed inside the
can't-
park. So it was scary. But after 2009, everything kind of opened up.
And so, sorry, I don't know, ignorant here, but I don't know too much about that conflict. What can you tell me just a bit about that? Because I don't know.
So it was, they call it an ethnic conflict, but it was more of a terrorist issue that,
Right.
I'm going to say this is my personal opinion on it.
Yeah, of
'cause
course.
It's very political.
Yeah.
So it was a terrorist problem we had this group of people who wanted to claim a part of the land for themselves, but they never really wanted to. I mean, they segregated themselves by race. But when they wanted to kill people, they didn't really care whether it was the same race they were from or whether it was
just to kill.
It was just killing.
Wow.
And it ended ugly. It
Very
ended
violent.
really ugly because a lot of civilians got trapped in between the forces and the terrorists. So it just ended ugly. So they were not giving up. The forces were not giving up. So it ended. I think a lot of people are thankful that it did end. But the way it ended was not ideal for everyone. And it raged on for 30 years. So
30 years.
30 years.
Well, this isn't. I guess a question I'm always keen to ask, like anyone in any country, whether it's when they're maybe not fully reliant on something like wildlife tourism, but anything can affect wildlife tourism. Like politically, like we've gone through
Weather
pandemic,
events.
weather events,
Weather,
pandemics recently that have kind of stopped that thing. Like, knowing that things can stop wildlife tourism, what would that mean for communities, wildlife environments for Sri Lanka if those pauses had to happen with the reliance on it? What mitigations are there to ensure that the work doesn't stop?
Right. So the pandemic, and then before the pandemic, we had the Easter bombings. Where we had on Easter Sunday morning during the Easter Sunday brunch, we had bombs go off in several churches. Suicide bombs, by the way, in several churches, plus some of the major hotels in Colombo. So that was not just locals, it was foreigners there as well. So that happened. Then the pandemic struck us. Then we went through a financial crisis. So this is past 5 years has been crazy.
Yeah, heavy.
And this affects the tourism industry heavily because people are not traveling. But what happened in Sri Lanka was the locals started traveling. Everyone just started traveling. When things opened up, everyone started traveling. Everyone was visiting the wildlife parks. They were going to the hotels. The hotels were putting out deals. And that's how most of the places survived. We've got places that, cater to a lot to foreign clients. And they didn't open up to the locals. They didn't survive. But the guys who opened up to the locals and even the wildlife parks, they just, people started going. Everyone just started traveling.
I mean, that happened here. The same thing
No, I was
happened
just
here.
saying that,
People were
literally.
just going on holiday in the UK.
Yeah.
And
going,
keeping
oh my God, look,
businesses
we've got a
open.
coastline.
Yeah.
We're an island, guys. It's always been there.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
But that's what kept a lot of places afloat. And even people like us, we started working with the local communities. We started looking at doing, research work in the wildlife parks, to support those things. And, people traveled. And it just kept, it allowed people to hold their heads up until things got better.
Yeah.
And then, eventually things are getting better. I think we could do about 50% better than we are already. And it is happening. I think winter's going to be a very busy winter for us, hopefully, fingers crossed. But it is picking up. And so we want the wildlife tourism to pick up. That's why we're here to, kind of promote Sri Lanka as a good wildlife destination.
Yeah.
It's so, I can't express enough. It is
I've
such
got
a
itchy
beautiful
feet
country.
right now.
You should
Such,
come. You should
such
come.
a beautiful
Definitely come.
culture. Such
Maybe we should do an
beautiful people.
on-location podcast.
Shall we?
Shall we
just go now?
Let's search for some funding.
Okay, let's find funding.
Has anyone got a tenner that we can start putting in a pot?
Join our... Yeah, we can...
We've got to ask you this question because we always ask very easy questions to our guests. Your favourite thing to see in Sri Lanka, wildlife?
Yeah, what do you want to show people
what's-
the most?
What's your your
Personally,
animal?
my favorite, it's got to be the jackal.
The jackal?
Yeah, it's not very popular among a lot of people, but I just seem
Is
it's
that
the
why
only
you
wild
like
dog
it?
species.
Is it your
in-
spirit animal?
Maybe. I don't know. I've never realized it. Just published a book on jackals in Sri Lanka.
okay,
Yeah.
Nice.
So yeah, we're studying them. Gonna do the genetic work maybe in the next few months to see whether it's a jackal. Maybe it could be a wolf. We don't know.
Yeah, okay.
Because in North Africa, the golden jackal is now the golden wolf.
Yeah.
So we don't
That
know.
might
How
upgrade
big
them a
are
bit.
they?
People might be more interested
Exactly,
in seeing them.
that's
We're
what we
so
want.
fickle as a species.
Jackal, nothing. Wolf,
Little
hello.
brand change. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, that's one part of this project is to popularize.
Yeah.
And you see them. Well, sadly, IUCN has classified them as least concern. So even getting funding for research is not easy.
Right.
Yeah,
But
right.
they are a very fascinating
Yeah.
animal.
A common old dog. Why would you give funding
Exactly.
to that?
Common old dog.
But no, I mean, you can relate so much to their behavior if you
Yeah.
properly look at them.
Oh.
Your pets at home, and even some behavior like, as us, because they're very loyal, and they're family oriented. It's amazing animal. So that's
Amazing.
that's probably
Amazing.
my favorite.
Well, Chandika, thank you so much for
Thank
coming on
you
the
so
show. It's
much.
been like fascinating, like a country that I've never focused on with conservation. So it's lovely
Yeah.
to be able to get to.
No,
ask
thank
these
you guys
questions.
for inviting me and having me over.
It's
It
great.
was a pleasure.
Yeah, and thank you so much for the work that you do. You
Yeah.
know, you're
Thank you.
clearly passionate, and I'm sure
You're
that
welcome.
anyone that ever gets the opportunity to be in Sri Lanka with you will.
I can see you searching for flights in
I'm,
your head right now.
I don't know.
I can see-
Do I need to be in the UK?
Does anyone need to be in the UK?
No, no.
There's a direct flight out of Heathrow.
Amazing.
What a great closing line. To that.
So good
Thank
to
you
meet
so much.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
guys. Thank you.
Cool. Hey, thank you.
Well, that was nice to
Oh, that
journey
took me back.
It did, didn't it? What a wonderful weekend.
But no, really good conversation. And what I
Yeah,
think one of the things that I
banging.
found, it really took me back to the time that I spent in Sri Lanka, bird watching and just having the most, like, there's no two ways about it. It was one of those rich experiences of my life that I, you know, even though I'm dubious about wildlife tourism now, I would never not do, and I would never give up, you know, those memories, those smells, that
Yeah.
culture, the community, the people that we spent time with. And yeah, that really, really brought it back. But interestingly, about how actually there's wildlife tourism within Sri Lanka.
Yeah, I think that's the bit that stayed with me the most. I don't know why. I assumed. I don't know what part of my brain is that. I just assumed people
we're-
wouldn't.
Well, I think sometimes we do forget that people from kind of non-white Western countries do like nature, and that, you know, do have free time and free money
And
to
do
be
you
able
know
to
what? I'm
spend-
going to hold my hands up. That's exactly where my brain's at.
Yeah.
That's exactly where it is. It's just that
Disposable
lack of
income.
thought. Yeah, 100%. And I
Yeah.
just, it's so annoying that's ingrained in my brain, but that's exactly what I thought. And it's to hear Chandika say that kind of, you know, when we asked him about, you know, how do you, when you rely on it, when we've seen these recent times where travel or foreign tourists aren't a thing, and him to go like, well, it was a problem, but also we had such a keen interest within our own country in our wildlife that it was kind of, it managed. I don't know, that made me go, oh shit, that's a beautiful thing. What a
Yeah.
wonderful thing. And but I would also argue, if he's saying that, and that's wonderful, I would say we probably don't have that as much in our own country in the UK.
Yeah, the appreciation for what we've got here internally traveling around. I think definitely we love a Ryanair. don't we?
Well, we love the prices.
Until you try and take a bag.
Yeah. Can I take this purse?
Do you mind if I wear
£9.
clothes on the plane?
Underwear only flights. So yeah, thank you so much for Chandika for giving his time at Global Bird Fair. We know how busy he was there.
Yeah.
Him and his team were doing wonderful things, and Jetwings is an he just
Maybe
knew
if you're
so much
lucky
about
enough,
his
you could
country.
go to Sri Lanka and go on a tour with him. But that'd be fun.
Absolutely. Well, I would love that.
He's a wildlife
And if anyone's
nerd.
he was very passionate about his country. So I think to sum up on this topic, Nadia, it's quite hard to do so, but I think what we've spoken about is it's kind of, again, I'll go back to what me and Adam said. It depends, right? It depends where you are, what you're doing. And I think something you said that I really agree with is in the short term, sure, right? You know, it can bring in revenue. It can create habitat protection, but it can also bring in issues such as land tenure issues. It can bring in kind of financial things not
Exclusion
helping.
of indigenous peoples.
Exactly that. You know, we're seeing that with the Maasai tribes now.
Well, you can see it
Certain
you
areas.
can see it in Jamaica and Barbados. There are big hotels that put the plant on the edge of a beach, and local people that can't use their beaches anymore.
Yeah, and this isn't, you know, this isn't a not common thing. This happens quite regularly.
But there are circumstances where there are these really, really, ultimately capitalism and money is the ruler. And so when a bit of land is making money for one reason, if you can switch it out for a conservation reason as opposed to the other, right now, some of those scenarios are good. And I think do your research before you go to places. Maybe try and avoiding the big 5-star places. Look at homestays. There are countries like Sri Lanka and India where homestays are an option. And in Eastern Europe countries, also Kazakhstan, there are places where actually you look at homestays, it's just somebody letting out their room. So it's a bit like Airbnb. And actually you're not then buying into a big hotel somewhere as well. So
And
there are
I
ways
will
of
say,
doing it.
as someone that has done Airbnb I know Airbnb is a bit of a, you know, question mark about it, but like, you know, I did Airbnbs and homestays in Cuba, and to have that experience in a country like that was so much better than staying in a hotel.
I stayed in one once. I went to Portugal and I stayed with this family's home. And I was like the weird little person in the attic that every time I would come downstairs, like they were like, come join us for dinner, come do this. And I was just like, I'm just going out. Like I was out from like, they were like, we never see you. You're always just in the attic.
Like Bart's evil twin from The
Yeah, that's
Simpsons.
exactly what I was like. But it was funny, right? It was part of my holiday.
It's just, yeah, and I think it's doing that. It's a very tricky world to navigate, but I think the big thing here is you're looking for buzzwords, not buzzwords necessarily, but words like community or communal land and kind of like community conservation. When you start to see that and you can look into it, it kind of starts working out. You know, if you can start a community-run lodge or a community-owned lodge or hotel or community-run tour guide companies, stuff like that, those are the things that like you're probably going down the better angle than rather than going, this is the first one that popped up on Google and it's got 5 stars because, you know, it's run by this big company. I would say like just, you know, roll the dice on some things and
and
also
like,
search for insect tourism. Like Adam said, you can go butterfly watching.
Go butterfly watching. And also just like, do you know what as well? If it just says eco, don't fall for that. Be more discerning.
Yeah, 100% question. Like, yeah, this is what we're talking about. Question this kind of stuff. So it's hard to summarize this kind of topic, nerds. But what like Nida and I have just said, and you all do this anyway, but with wildlife tourism, just think about it. And question it. And when you're talking about it, like, you know, maybe venture within the UK if you want to see wildlife, you know, because we kind of get that urge to go and see it, but, you know, maybe you don't
see
need
the
to fly,
wildlife in the UK first, then you're allowed to go.
Then once you've seen all 7 of our species, then you can go.
All 4 mammals left.
Polecat, grey squirrel, feral cat, and rat. Once you've seen them, then you can go. No, it's lovely to chat to you about. I hope you've learned lots about wildlife tourism, or it's at least conjured up some questions in your brain. You know, that's what we're here for.
Conjured up questions in your brain.
That's what we're here for. Not to give you answers, to give you more questions. We'll be back next month. I'm excited for the next one.
Oh.
So until next time, nerds, you know the deal. If you're not following us on social media, do so. A lot of people are leaving Twitter at the moment, but we're still on there because we're trying to post nice nature stuff.
Drop us a few quid. Drop us a few quid as well, so Oscar can.
If you can, so Oscar can eat this month. So Oscar can eat. Please visit www.
At the moment, you can only stay in a 3-star lodge.
Let's push that up to 3.5. www.kofi.com/Into the Wild Pod, where price of a coffee, just donate that in. Everything we get there goes straight back into the show. Follow us on social media.
As I say, Dad, thank you every single time for our coffee.
And my mum and dad, I know your pockets are deeper than that. And I think that's everything. We have got some news coming out in the next month. So
we've got some big news.
We've got some big news. So I'm just going to leave that hanging. But until next time, nerds, we'll chat to you soon.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning into the show, nerds. If you don't already, make sure to follow us on social media at Into the Wild Pod on Twitter and at Into the Wild Podcast on Instagram.
And if you're able to and would like to, you can support the show by tipping us at ko-fi.com/Into the Wild Pod. That buys us the equivalent of a coffee, and we use it to fund more podcasts for your ears.
But until next time, keep well and live the good life.